All right. Thank you all for being here this morning. I want to welcome you to the April 24, 2024 quarterly meeting of the Colorado Forest Health Council. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you for working through any technical issues. We will refine this process along the way, but the reason that we're trying something new is to provide more security during our Forest Health Council meetings. First, we are going to take roll call. So let's start with that. Director McCombs.
Present.
Director Morgan or a designee. Regional Forester Frank Bem. John Ring.
Present.
Samantha Albert.
Present.
Vice Chairman Selwyn Whiteskunk. Commissioner Abe Layden. Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally.
Present and good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Veronica Medina. Commissioner Clyde Church. Ethan Buchholz.
Present.
Brett Wolk. Katie McGrath Novak.
Here.
Amy Moyer.
Here.
Mark Morgan.
Here.
Paige Lewis. Julie Stensel.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Christy Belton.
I'm here. Morning.
Good morning. Pat Dorsey.
Here.
Scott Jones. Senator
Yes.
Cutter.
Yep, I'm here. Sorry, I had myself muted.
No problem. Good morning. Senator Cutter. And Representative Lynch. And just entering Executive Director Dan Gibbs.
All right. Hello, everyone. Apologize. I was having some technical issues. Can you all hear me? Okay, great.
Dan, I'll pass
Have you
the
all started
agenda
yet?
over. Ready? Would you like to take the lead?
Sure. Where are we at now in the agenda, Allison?
We just went through roll call and we needed 13 for a quorum, and we are good to go now. We have a quorum for today's meeting.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. I just know how busy you all are, and yeah, grateful for your service on this really important council. So first up, we have the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the January 31st?
Also move.
Yeah, okay. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposition? Say nay. Okay. Seeing none. And then, so let's move to item 3, and we have James Lucero, who will give us an update on what's going on at the Capitol. So James, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Director Gibbs. Nice to see you all. We are on day 106 of day 120. So we're in the home stretch. Two total weeks, and I anticipate the legislature using all 14 days, including some Saturdays and some Sundays. The last stat that I saw on Twitter was about 300 plus bills still moving through the system. We have been tracking a total of 5 bills. I'm going to start with the ones in the House because those ones are the ones that have had the most movement so far. So the bill that has made it the furthest, this is just one that we have been monitoring, is House Bill 1300. That is the home mitigation, the wildfire mitigation and home sales bill. That one took quite a path. It started as a very, very broad bill. The sponsors heard extensive committee, and they were able to narrow that bill down to a permissive bill. So it's giving counties the option of creating this sort of wildfire mitigation program that certifies that their house is protected for wildfire in the event of a sale. The Forest Service was chasing a few amendments on that bill. We were able to secure all of our amendments. They were looking at a way to change our Healthy Forests and Vibrant Communities Fund. The sponsors worked with us in order to remove that section. And then one of the standards and guidelines that the home sale people can use is our own home ignition zone guidelines. And in that, there was just some technical errors in that. We were able to fix those changes. We're seeking one more change, but that bill is due up to pass third reading, final passage in the House today in about probably 20 minutes. And so it'll move over to the Senate, at which point we will fix that last technical amendment. Basically, the home ignition zone has 3 zones. Zone 1, which is 0 to 5 feet, Zone 2, which is 5 to 30 feet, and then Zone 3, which is 30 to 100 feet. They just got the feet markers wrong in that bill, and so it's very simple technical cleanup. But I do anticipate that bill getting bipartisan support in the House and moving over to the Senate. The next 2 bills, House Bill 1024, that came out of Wildfire Review Committee. That is the extended funding for the Live Wildfire Ready campaign. That bill started with a pretty large fiscal note after the long bill had passed at the beginning of April. The JBC and members of the Appropriations Committee were letting all sponsors of any legislation know that the budget was going to be tight this year. I think the number we heard was 25 million between the 2 chambers, House and Senate, for discretionary spending from the legislature. So Representative Story was working with the Forest Service to understand kind of what a bare minimum would be in order to carry that out. And so we sent her just a list of like what we spent money on this past year, and that fiscal was brought down quite a bit. It started at 300,000. It's now sitting at 40,000. That bill did pass Appropriations Committee yesterday morning. It is due for debate tomorrow on second reading by the Committee of the Whole, and I anticipate that one going pretty smoothly. The last bill, and then I'll open it up to House questions, is House Bill 1006, which we'll probably get into much later down when we're talking about our legislative recommendations. But this bill also came out of the Wildfire Review Committee. It started as a kind of grant navigator for rural counties. That was housed in OEDIT. We did a lot of work with the sponsors to get this into a place where it's now a program that is being facilitated by the Colorado State Forest Service, where NGOs can partner with us to do the grant Sorry, I'm a little sleepy. My fire alarm was going off at 2:30 this morning, and it didn't go off until about 3 o'clock. So my words are getting a little jumbled. The NGOs can partner with us, and then they'll act as those grant navigators. They can help rural counties apply for grants. They can help grant writing. They can actually do the work that is necessitated by wildfire mitigation work. That bill is probably the one that's not moving quick at all in the House, because there is discussions among the House sponsors, the Colorado State Forest Service, and basically the governor's office, and like how much money is there. There's no money attached to that except for an FTE for the Forest Service to actually carry out that program. but Legislative Council has reached out to us to say how much would an effective program cost, and rather than advocate for certain dollar amounts through Daphne Gervais' guidance at DNR, we let Leg Council know that similar programs cost about $50,000. And so that's the number that Leg Council, I think, is working with in order to facilitate what an effective program would be. I have not heard back what number the House sponsors are going to settle on, but until there's a budget associated with that one, it's not going to be moving out of appropriations anytime soon. And so those are the three bills that are currently in the House. I'm happy to take any questions on 1300, the home sale, 1024, Live Wildfire Ready, and 1006, the Grant Navigators bill. Perfect. Director Gibbs, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, are there any questions for you, James?
Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, Katie.
Just to confirm, these are things that we're tracking, but they did not come out of our recommendations as the Forest Health Council. Is that correct?
Correct. The only one that came out of recommendations from us is in the Senate, and I'm going to touch base on that bill here in a little bit. But you're correct. These are ones that I think have interest for the Forest Health Council, but none of them came out of our recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
So then moving on to the Senate, we're tracking two bills, and I'll start with actually Senate Bill 009, and that is the slash removal bill. That is the one that came out of our recommendation last year. And so that bill is sitting in a very similar position to 1006. It got a favorable recommendation out of the Senate Agricultural Committee, and then it's been sitting in the Appropriations Committee, just waiting to find that dollar amount. We're in the same kind of web of how much the sponsors think they can get versus how much is out there for discretionary spending. And that's kind of where we are. The number that's in that bill, and I know that they're going to try and move that one down, is $250,000 for an effective grant program. But I think they're going to start working on lowering that. I don't know what that amount may or may not be, but that's where Senate Bill 009 is sitting. Commissioner Shattuck McNally?
Sorry, James, are you done with that? Because I do have some information, because I had it happen through counties and commissioners and counties acting together. They had reached out to me, and I got looped into a conversation. So I have an update if you'd like me to share on that.
Absolutely, I'd love to hear it.
Great. So they were talking with the sponsors, which is Senator Cutter and Senator Jacques Lewis, and also talking to Senator Bridges. And it sounds like they're going to try to remove. Now, this is all kind of private, so I don't know what, this is only what I have as yesterday, but it looks like they're going to move the post-disaster debris removal and narrow the bill only to a slash removal pilot program, and that they would probably reduce the fiscal note to $150,000 to cover only 3 counties in a pilot program at $50,000 each. And so I think they're looking at moving some other bills and fiscal notes around to kind of help cover that. But that's what I was given some information yesterday. And so I thought I haven't had a chance to share that all with you yet. So I just thought I would share it this morning. But that's what I had been contacted last week by some of the lobbying teams and some of the folks and by the sponsors. And they had asked me, they had just looped me in to see what I thought about that. So just wanted to share that with you. As an individual commissioner, they wanted to get my input. So
how private is that? How private is that information? Because I'd like to loop Daphne into that just so she's aware too.
Let's see. I think as of yesterday, it probably was closed out. I don't know what came out for the information from that, but it was something that county commissioners and counties acting together, which, and full disclosure, I'm a member of. Our Larimer County is a member of, and they were still pushing to support that and try to be an extra lobbying push for it. And so that's how I got looped in on that side. And so I think as of close of business yesterday, that all that information had to be signed off on. So I think I'm not sure if that's I would just maybe see, have Daphne reach out to Senator Jacques Lewis and Senator Cutter today, because I think that all had to be closed up as of yesterday, close of business. So that's the latest I have, so.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I'll have Daphne and I can both reach out to the sponsors to kind of see if that's the direction that they will start to be moving in then. But thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'm sorry, James, I haven't had enough hours in the day to say, hey, I had some information, so thank you.
And then the last bill that we're tracking is Senate Bill 28. That is just, it's another study bill. It's studying biochar. It is a Senator Cutter bill. We're running into that same kind of fiscal problem. The bill is actually needing to get a revised fiscal, and I don't know where that one's going to end up. When CSU initially submitted the fiscal analysis for that bill to begin with, the fiscal analysis came back much lower than what they'd actually need. And even at that lower dollar amount, it's still, I think, over this magical threshold that the JBC and the leadership in both chambers trying to get people to in order to pass the most legislation. So if and when CSU starts to move on that revised fiscal and how much money it'll cost, I think we'll have a better understanding of where that bill will be. But that one is still just parked in appropriations. And as far as I can tell, neither 1006, 009, or 028 have actually been scheduled in an appropriations committee. That being said, this late in session, appropriations committees usually can happen with 24 hours notice. And so I check the calendars every day to see if and when they get scheduled. But right now, there is nothing on the schedule for those 3 bills. Happy to take any questions about those 2 or just legislative happenings in general.
I'll just jump in just really quick, just so on the Live Off Already campaign, one of the things I wanted y'all to be aware of, acknowledging that the fiscal has been reduced substantially. I want you to know that the State Forest Service is committed to spending some of our state fire assistance resources we get through the federal annual grant to buttress and continue to make whole that program, acknowledging the long-term goal, I think, between the partners that stood that effort up. Our intent with Representative Story's original bill, our intent on continuing to find ways to resource that entity going forward. So I just wanted you to, even though the costs are, the potential support's going down, we're going to continue to invest in and try to stand up what I think is a really successful and far-reaching campaign to date. So this is just an FYI.
Go ahead, Mr. Morgan.
Yes. Thursday and Friday, I was at the Colorado Timber Industry Association annual meeting. And one item of interest at this point is that I ran into a young lady over there and we had quite a discussion. And on your biochar issues, there is some serious money looking at this from the private side right now, really serious money. They've hired a lot of consultants and they're doing some test runs. And so I think a lot of your biochar questions might get answered from work being done right now at the private sector. These people are serious and they've got a lot of resources and a lot of backing. And they're kind of coming at it from the idea of selling carbon credits on the world market. And I've heard a lot of situations like this before, but these folks know the right folks and they got real money to put it into it. So, and their operation is in progress right now. So I don't know what's going to happen with the biochar. The other thing is that some of the major equipment manufacturers are also entering into this. So I think a lot of the heavy lifting there on what's possible is going to get done for you from the private sector, and you just might kind of harvest the results.
That's really good information. Thank you so much. The last kind of legislative update that I'll close with doesn't really deal with legislation. but we did kind of touch on this topic in our January full council meeting. Director Gibbs and Director McCombs had kind of let everybody know that after this organizational assessment, there's a desire to maybe consolidate budgeting and legislative requests for the State Forest Service. Director Gibbs is being very, very gracious in letting us maybe explore some alternative options on budget requests and legislative requests. And so we've been in talks with the Department of Natural Resources, with Carly Jacobs, their Chief Financial Officer, and everybody else about ways that we can be further integrated into that budget process. And so we're still in kind of like a trial run to see how and if it works. But I just wanted to say thank you to Director Gibbs and the rest of your team for really, really helping us fulfill some of these organizational assessments, especially in this kind of direction. I think you're muted, Director.
Yeah, my pleasure, James. Yeah, thanks for your kind words, and also Matt too. It's been good working with you all, of course. And the overarching goal is to really make sure that we work together as a team to get you the tools and resources you need to make sure the State Forest Service is a success, and that we're really tipping the needle on protecting life, safety, critical infrastructure, and having a very proactive forest management in Colorado, and really meeting this moment in time. So I am very hopeful that this more or less new partnership will result in potential increase, staffing, funding, programming, all the stuff that we can all do to make sure that you're continuing to do really meaningful work in Colorado. So I'll just leave it at that.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Real-time update, everybody. The House Bill 1300 passed with 38 aye votes, 23 no votes, and 4 excused. So that bill is moving over to the Senate.
Awesome.
And that is what I have for the legislative update section.
Okay, that's great. Well, good. Well, James, you're actually up for the next update as well with administrative recommendations. So why don't you just move right into that?
Perfect. Just to give everybody a reminder, what those 4 administrative recommendations were, and then I'll touch base about each of them. So the first one, the Legislative Committee has asked the Colorado State Forest Service to convene a forum or meeting around adaptive civiculture, vapor pressure deficit changes, and how this impacts the future health of our forests and what measures for mitigation actions we should consider. The second one is the Legislative Committee recommends, as part of the Interagency Colorado Fire Commission Prescribed Fire Subcommittee, that the CSFS, DFPC, and other agencies and/or stakeholders convene an informal session or sessions to increase awareness and facilitate participation in prescribed fire and / disposal policy development in Colorado. In particular, tribal voices and perspectives shall be included to raise awareness of historic tribal and cultural practices and expertise in prescribed fire. And core issues to be addressed should include liability, smoke management, and resource capacity. The agencies will have 12 months from the full Forest Health Council approval to convene. And then the last kind of like thorough meeting one is the Legislative Committee recommends DNR and CSFS work with the United States Forest Service to negotiate the ability for NGOs and state agencies to reforest U.S. Forest Service lands under shared stewardship or good neighbor authority type agreements, and also state agencies lobby federal partners to expedite NEPA for post-fire reforestation projects. And then the last legislative recommendation was to develop a pre-fire and forest planning guidebook. Sorry, I just saw a question from the commissioner. Oh, okay. So those are those 4. John, do you have a question?
Yeah, can we add BLM to the reforestation recommendation?
I don't know if we can add it right now since the full council actually passed this language last year. But I don't think that's apart from us going ahead and lobbying for that if that's what this group desires.
Thanks.
So now just some individual updates on each of those. I'm going to start with the second one I described because that's the one that's moved the furthest. That's the prescribed fire one. And it's the only one with an actual timeline. So 12 months from the full Forest Health Council, we approved this last August. So we have until August to get this one completed. Have done a lot of work with a lot of people. I want to thank Courtney. I want to thank Allison. I want to thank Stacy Coleman and DNR2. We were able to pull together quite a large group of people for an initial meeting to discuss this and how we wanted to move forward. I was able to secure members from the Colorado State Forest Service, from the Division of Fire Prevention and Control, representatives from the Ute Mountain Ute and the Southern Mountain Ute, and unfortunately, one member from CDPHE, Public Health and Environment. He is very interested in joining the discussions, but he could not join in this initial discussion. But we had a very good discussion about kind of what this legislative administrative recommendation entails and what that outcome and what those goals should be in order to do this. And basically, from a very top level, Rocco Snart, who is one of the acting chairs of the Prescribed Fire Subcommittee, and Daniel Beveridge from the Colorado State Forest Service, who is also a chair there, expressed a very good desire to be more, I don't want to say transparent because that's not the word, but be more available to this Forest Health Council on maybe providing updates on what is going on in the Forest Health Council, because a lot of the language in this administrative recommendation is stuff that they're actually working on. And so it's just literally an update to maybe the Forest Health Council and saying, this is where we are in it. Suffice that to say that I'm looking for one more date to kind of solidify what this actually looks like. And then at the end of the day, there'll probably be a report out from this group to the full Forest Health Council on kind of what those recommendations entail and kind of where all those moving pieces are. Allison, I know you were in that meeting. Is there anything that I might have missed that might be important to touch on?
I think you really got it there, James. There are a few of us also that are a part of both the Forest Health Council and the Prescribed Fire Subcommittee, or participating in the Colorado Fire Commission as well. So we do have some nice overlap between both committees and councils. And so, yeah, just very much looking forward to having some more connectivity between both of them. And I think that what we got from that first meeting is it was well received, and that we can provide these opportunities for updates, or even if we wanted to do maybe a separate 1-hour meeting, we will be able to set that up to fulfill this recommendation.
Thank you for that, Allison. The second, go ahead, Director Gibbs.
No.
Okay. The second one I'll talk about is the one that I've made some progress on as well. And this is the adaptive silviculture and vapor pressure deficit. I was able to connect a bunch of subject matter experts. I reached out initially to Dr. Sarah Hart, who gave our legislative subcommittee an initial kind of presentation on vapor pressure deficit. And then in discussions with her, I asked for some other people in CSU and outside of CSU on who we need to involve in order to have a very thoughtful discussion. So I was able to secure some members, Dr. Sarah Hart from CSU, Dr. Tony Chang from CSU, and then Ethan Buteholtz from this council and the CSFS, along with Associate Director Amanda West Fordham from the CSFS. And then in discussions with those people, we actually were able to identify 3 other people outside of both CSU and the CSFS, 1 member from the United States Forest Service, another member from Western State Southern University, I think is what it's called, the university in Gunnison, and then a member from the NGOs, just working specifically on this information. And so I kind of, once I've secured all of those members, I kind of let them know that I'm going to fulfill the the administrative recommendation, since that one has a timeline, but they're all aware, they all have very much interest in coming together. And so once this fire committee one gets kind of more in a resolved place, I'll probably start to tune into these people to kind of talk about this one and how we want to fulfill these goals and how we want to present that information to the Forest Health Council. Yes, thank you, Ethan. Mike Battaglia from the U.S. Forest Service, and then Dr. Jonathan Koop from Western State Colorado University. And then I think her name was Courtney. Do you remember where she's from, Ethan, off the top of your head?
Courtney Peterson?
Yes, Courtney Peterson.
Yeah,
I think she's also from CSU.
Yeah, she's a CSU.
Now that I'm remembering out loud. So we do have our subject matter experts in hand, ready to go. And I think I'll have some more information once we get past this prescribed fire subcommittee. Any questions on that administrative recommendation? There is no NGO rep. I thought Courtney Peterson that was the name, and then I was like, nope, she's CSU. Sorry for that miscommunication. Thanks, Katie.
So James, just real quick on this, I wanted to make sure everyone was clear. That's why I asked the question in the chat that the Fire Commission has a prescribed fire subcommittee that's sort of been driving some of the policy formulation and dialogue. We have now sort of a joint committee of folks from the Forest Health Advisory Council and the Fire Commission supporting development of a strategic planning effort for the state of Colorado. DFPC sourced resources through DHSEM, FEMA resources to fund this. And as I understand things, the investment's relatively robust. We should have a pretty robust process. And the goal of the effort is to identify the barriers and then solution build around those barriers to deploying RX Fire, at the scale that's needed and in a way that's safe and that's inclusive of communities and tribes that want to participate. So just know that effort is like getting ready to launch and will be based on Chief Morgan's perspective and certainly supported by Director Gibbs and myself, will be a robust engagement, and there should be lots of opportunity for not only this committee to participate formally, but individuals on this committee, or excuse me, council, to participate as representatives of your own stakeholders. So just know that effort's coming. I think it's going to be a really great way to shine a light on the challenges that we have in Colorado with this unique forest management tool and restoration tool. And I'm really excited that we have some resources to make that move forward professionally and consequentially. So just a heads up there, and I certainly can take any questions, or Allison, if I mischaracterized from our last CFC meeting, let me know. And the last thing with the commission also voted to support that what we're calling it the super committee of the two entities, advisory bodies, to continue to provide governance, feedback, and input into the development of that process and its implementation. So the council, as well as the Colorado Fire Commission, will have really good opportunities to shape and participate actively throughout that strategic planning process at the statewide level.
Thanks, Matt. Any questions for Director McCombs? The last two administrative recommendations are the NGO and reforestation. I've taken that one kind of very far removed from this kind of present time because there are so many changes happening right now at the U.S. Forest Service. If you were able to catch the governor's wildfire briefing, Regional Forester Frank Bem has announced his retirement, and so just waiting for some of those. And then Jackie Buchanan is leaving, and so there's just a bunch of shifting happening right now at the RO. And so waiting for some people to settle in before we start to engage. That way we have the people that are going to be there in the long term actually going through some of these discussions. And so that one has taken a little back burner, but it is not off my radar, but it's just waiting for some of those personnel to settle in before we start moving forward and engaging on some of those talks. And then the last administrative recommendation, I thought I saw Brett here. Brett, yes, you are here. I'm kind of unfamiliar with this one. I know that you and the rest of the Leveraging Resources Committee have been really focusing on this one. I was wondering if you might have an update on the pre-fire forest planning health guide.
I do have an update on that. I was going to give it as part of the legislative or the Leveraging Resources Committee updates, which is I think next on the agenda. So maybe there's been a lot of progress. We've been working on it. So maybe I'll hold there and see if there's more questions on the other recommendations before we move into that committee update. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Thank you. Are there any questions for me?
Great. Thanks, James, for those updates. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Director.
Yeah. So Brett, we'll turn it over to you for update on leveraging resources as well as a few of those administrative recommendations too that you've been working on.
Fantastic. Thank you, and great to be here with everyone. There is a open window in a street right outside my computer, so let me know if you can't hear me. Otherwise, I'll just keep going and assume you can hear me. So yeah, the Leveraging Resources Committee, I don't have it in front of me, the exact text of our mandate from the statute that created this council, but we've been trying to work over the last couple of years on right, how do we leverage different resources? Those are both financial resources as well as human resources and people and time and things like that. We've had 2 meetings. We meet monthly, and we've had 2 meetings since our last full council meeting in January, one in February and one in March. And honestly, those have been great places for coordination of information, but there's been a lot of work that is happening outside of those committee meetings to support the work of that committee. The 2 main things that committee has been working on is helping advise and develop the Colorado Forest Management Activity Tracker, or the Forest Tracker, and then also this Forest Resilience Planning Guide that James mentioned as a recommendation. I will say one thing that we have done within the committee, and I worked with the current chair, Christina Burry, to help think through this, is start reaching out to individual members of the committee and ask them to share what resources do you have that you would like to see better leveraged, and what resources would you like from other people around the state that can help better be leveraged with your interests. So asking people to be more engaged and say, from the recreation perspective, what haven't we talked about that you have to offer, and what would you like to offer us as a state committee? We reached out to Selwyn White Skunk, who came and in the March meeting shared some ways that he would like things that tribes can bring to the table and things that tribes are looking for from this council and other state resources. So I think moving forward, that's something that we'd like to continue. So there's project work happening, and then there's sort of also conceptual conversations happening. I will start with the Forest Tracker updates. That is a project that is being led by the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute, myself, and Stephanie Mueller, and then in close partnership with the Colorado State Forest Service. And we are focusing right now on processing a lot of the federal data, specifically from the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the National Park Service, as well as state data, and that includes all the State Forest Service data, as well as from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Other state agency data, we reached out to like Colorado Water Conservation Board and Division of Fire Prevention and Control, and for a variety of different reasons, their data didn't quite fit in with our criteria right now to be included. That doesn't mean it won't be included later, but for this first go around, that's kind of what we're working with. So we're still hoping, we're moving through and hoping to release a beta version in the next month or two that includes just that federal data and the state data. We've also worked through this council to collect a lot of other data, local municipalities, county, NGO work, other things that are not captured in that state and federal data. But that is a lot more people to contact and a lot more scattered data to collect. Katie McGrath Novak and the Forest Collaborators Network has been super helpful reaching those people. But it's also, I think the first phase is to release some of this federal and state data and see where there's overlap with all these other data and where there's holes. Because there's a lot of overlap in all this local data that uses state or federal grant funding and gets recorded in those more corporate databases. So before we put a ton more effort into calling everybody around the whole state and asking for their data, we're going to first release the corporate data and then share that and say, where do you see holes and what else do you want to add to this? So it's sort of a staged release, whereas in a couple months, we'll release the beta version with the state and federal data. And then later this year, once we then do some more groundwork and fill the holes, we'll release a more comprehensive database. So that's sort of where we're at in the process of the Forest Tracker. We are hoping to still use the Leveraging Resources Committee and this larger council as sort of beta testers and about what is useful with the data, what is not, who else should we be reaching out to, those sort of things. So maybe I'll stop there for just an update. Any questions on the Forest Tracker and progress with that before we move into the Forest Resilience Planning Guide?
Awesome work.
Just
want to say, like, this is no small thing, everybody, and it's going to be an incredible tool for us to tell story about all of the incredible work that's happening across all the landscapes in Colorado. I'm going to thank Dan in particular for championing this and keeping it on folks' radar, and others for stepping in and making it happen. And the partnership between CFRI and CSFS and others to make this a reality is really, really exciting, and I can't wait to build it out. So thanks in particular to Brett and his team and the folks at State Forest Service and others that have supported this along the way. It's awesome.
Yeah, great work for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that, Director McCombs. And it has been great. And yeah, I can't emphasize enough the collaboration with the State Forest Service. Again, we're sort of doing the work on the ground of processing and looking through all of the polygons and all the treatments and aligning all the different fields so that it can make sense to anyone and taking all the codes and the jargon sort of out as best we can. I will mention as a Leveraging Resources Committee in the fall, our meetings focused on, we invited people from California and Utah, and I believe maybe one other place, but California and Utah to present on their similar forest management tracking systems. So we've been learning from them about what ways and what lessons learned from them that we can implement in Colorado. And we also talked about the staffing that's needed to carry this forward. As Director McComb said, it's a large effort to put this together and then maintain it. So I think just keep that on everyone's radar. And that's, I thought I was being generous in our timeline of when we could release this, and it keeps always saying a couple months out. And I think that's a little reflective of the scale that we're getting into, but also we're realizing the need and desire for this. And so hoping to release something sooner than later in a clear way that people understand what it is and what it is not, right? We don't want to rush to releasing that's going to do more damage than good if it's not complete, but yeah, something to certainly consider moving forward, how we want to keep maintaining this. Any other questions on the Forest Tracker? Great. Well, I will move into the other legislative recommendation that James mentioned of the Forest Resilience Planning Guide. As a reminder, the inspiration for this guide started with there is a post-fire playbook that was developed after a lot of the 2020 fires in Colorado, where after that, a lot of people involved in the post-fire response put their knowledge together and said, wow, this was kind of crazy to connect all the dots and figure out how to deal with this. Let's make a very simple guide so next time this happens, other people are better positioned. And the Leveraging Resources Committee thought that was really great and useful. Why don't we do something similar for pre-fire? And that has morphed into now more of a comprehensive kind of guide of how to plan and think across managing forests framed around before, during, and after fire, and not pointing people to specific tools or specific actions. Because if we do that, that would be very quickly out of date as new tools and things come online all the time. But more of a framework of what kind of questions should you be asking of new tools that come out? How would you go about finding the right tools or financial resources or other partners to do the work that is needed in your area? So that's sort of a little bit of the goals and the purpose. The scope and the audience is framed as people working at roughly a county or multiple county area and planning over kind of that scale of geography, which is where I think the sweet spot has been for a lot of planning in Colorado. But not necessarily larger or not necessarily smaller at like a HOA level or individual homeowner level. It's a little bit more larger landscapes and larger social landscapes as well. One thing that is already developed is it will be useful for those people, but it will also be very useful for statewide decision makers to help understand what kinds of resources the groups on the ground doing those planning efforts most benefit from and need, right? So it's not about who is winners and losers and getting different kinds of different money in different grant programs, but how to tweak our grant programs and our funding to give the people actually what they need. Some people are ready to go out and do implementation and do prescribed burning planning right now. Other people need to get together and develop a common vision and shared values and develop a landscape plan before they're ready to apply for grant funding to do prescribed burning. So helping people identify what stage of readiness they're at across the state will help people on the ground, but also help inform this council and the state legislature and other state and federal programs on how to best tweak our resources so they can best be leveraged and help people across the state. So that's sort of the broad framework that we're shooting for and sort of the goals and intended outcomes of that guide. I'll share one more quick update just on the progress, and then I see your hand up, Paige. To accomplish all this is no small feat, and we said we're kind of all volunteers on this council, and that's a lot of work. So there was a recommendation, I think, in last year's Forest Health Council annual report to hire a facilitator to help with this process. And we have gone under contract with them through the Colorado State Forest Service. And thank you to Diana Selby for making all of that happen behind the scenes and doing the contracting. And so that's Collaborative Decision Resources is a facilitator that has been hired. They've started and we've had, I think, 2 meetings so far with a core group that is working on this. And that is myself, Katie McGrath Novak, and Christina Burry. And then Diana Selby and Courtney Young have both been participating in that to sort of move things along. And then as we have our monthly Leveraging Resources Committee meetings, we will bring progress there and engage more members. So more members are welcome, but those are the people that volunteered last fall to be on a smaller working group and do a lot of the heavy lifting of actually helping write and put the guide together. So that funding for that facilitator was paid largely from State Forest Service, I believe the Healthy Forest Vibrant Communities Fund that they have. And that was $30,000, and then that wasn't quite enough. So CFRI, my organization, actually pitched in an extra $5,000 to make it all come together. So there is not funding from the council to that. This is some of our statewide organizations are helping step up to fund this process, which again, Director McCombs, amazing, and thank you for making things happen. So that's kind of my update and where we're at. We're just getting started on it, but it's exciting and things are going to move quickly now that we have a facilitator. They're doing their job and whipping us in shape. Paige and anyone else?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. It's awesome to get that update. It does sound like a great future resource. I just wondered if you have if you just have a little summary write-up about this effort that I could share with a couple others just to let them know what's happening, and then also what your time frame is for doing this.
Yes, there is, and I think it got included in our the Forest Health Council annual report. There's sort of the intro and goals and objectives audience of the guide. And I can share that with you and the whole council again. We have it as a separate Word doc. That has not changed or been updated since then. We were sort of in a holding pattern waiting to hire this facilitator and get going. So it's maybe not the best public facing summary, but we have something.
I wasn't going to share it with public, yeah, just internally. And then the time frame for doing
the time frame. So we are hoping we are initially thinking this is about a 6-month effort. So sometime September, October. As we get into it, that's a little flexible. But we're trying, we don't want to make it a 1.5-year effort, right? It's big principles, sort of broad guidance. But also as we get into it, we want to make it a valuable resource. So let's put about 6 months of effort into it. Part of what we hired the facilitator to do is to convene some focus groups and do some interviews. So that'll include members of the council as well as people not on the council to get perspectives on what should be included in it and value of it to them. So 6-ish months if everything goes well. I think Katie is not so secretly hoping that it's near final for the Colorado Forest Collaborative Summit in September, so we can sort of share a bunch of it there. And I have one other important update. If there's any other questions on the Forest Tracker, Resilience Guide, or other things that the Leveraging Resources Committee has been working on. The last update is that Christina Burry is resigning from the Forest Health Council, and she therefore can no longer be chair of the Leveraging Resources Committee. So that is on our to-do list at one of our next meetings, is to elect a new chair. And I'm not sure Courtney or Allison can chime in on exactly what that process is, or I don't know if we need to discuss it now, but something to put on everyone's radar. And yes, it is a very, I think, positive thing for the state, Matt. Everyone, I am super excited about Christina's move to the State Forest Service and everything that she brings and adds to your organization. I think Denver Water is still in a very strong place, and she left them in an extremely strong place, and it's going to help help everyone moving forward. So that's what I have.
Thanks for these updates. And Matt, I don't know if there was any discussion earlier about Christina moving over to your team, but anything that you want to officially announce for that too, or maybe you already have.
I think the announcement went out to the council. I sure hope it did. I sent it to everybody. We are as excited as we can possibly be to bring that type of capacity and leadership to the agency. And I look forward to the balancing effect that she'll have on me as well. So that it's all very exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, Brett, thanks so much for your updates. Really appreciate your work on this committee, as well as information on the leveraging resources component that you've been involved with. Anything else for Brett? Any follow-up questions or anything before we move to our next agenda item? Okay, seeing none. Let's move to Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally, who will give us an update on the legislative committee, as well as share an update on some of the recommendations for 2025. It's crazy to say that number, 2025, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you all. And I have to say thank you, Brett, and I also serve on the Leveraging Resources Committee. And I appreciate that update. When I was listening, I'm thinking, wow, we did a lot of stuff this last year. So I really appreciate the chance to kind of review for myself as all the things that we've done. So well done, everyone, and congratulations, great work. I just want to first thank all the members of our legislative committee. We meet every 2 weeks. I think we've taken a couple, one meeting off around the holidays, but hardworking group and very dedicated. And we usually have almost 100% attendance, and just really want to thank them all for their tireless work and just really the amount of engagement and discussion and all the consensus building that we have. It's really just an honor to work with you all, and just want to give a shout out to all of you, because it is a big commitment to meet every 2 weeks. As you all know, we did a backwards kind of planning timeline, and I think we shared that in January, maybe even the meeting beforehand, and it has worked well, and we'll probably do a few tweaks. But just wanted to share that we had 3 different meetings. One of them we increased to an hour and a half, but we filled up each and every one of those the last 3 meetings with deliberation on these recommendations. And so I just wanted to kind of, again, just talk about the process that we've kind of tried to develop to have these recommendations done early for the budget discussion. And it's hard to believe with only a few days left in the session. And trust me, my calendar shows it with all the meetings. I'm actually missing a property tax conversation right now for counties. There's a lot happening. And so my schedule and free time is filled up with legislative meetings. So I just want to say thanks again for everybody. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the recommendations. We did have a few more speakers I wanted to share with you all. Oops, sorry, here comes the train. Give me about 30 seconds. Let me put myself on. I don't know if you can hear the train, but it's right outside my office. But we did have earlier this year, we had heard from some of the collaboratives. We had Katie Novak. Thank you, Katie, for coming to present twice to kind of share some of the recommendations from the Forest Health Collaboratives. And we had we had 2 meetings about that, and some robust conversations to hear about some of their, from the ground up, kind of some of their thoughts and concerns and needs, and comments on some of the possible needs from the collaborative perspective, which was a really productive and wonderful conversation. Then we had 2 collaborative representatives, Daniel Walker from the Forest Program Manager from the Coalition for the Poudre Watershed, which is from my county, and then Chiara, I hope I pronounced this right, Chiara Forrester, who was the Forest Program Director from the Poudre from the Watershed Center, and they were very helpful in those meetings as well. So and so with that, all those meetings we had, like I said, are 3 deliberative meetings, and it's been a very very powerful conversation to have. So now I'm going to share some of those recommendations that we had come to recommend to you all. So first, let me just say we had a long discussion about the administrative directive that we've heard about today, the updates, and we certainly thought we should not have any more administrative updates or direction from our legislative committee, and just support the administrative directions that we presented last year, and support the agencies and partners who are helping with those administrative directives, and make sure that we're aware of the needs or the capacity or of support we might need to give as a full Forest Health Council. So that was one part of the conversations, and thanks again, James, and to all those involved who are working very hard on those administrative directives from the Forest Health Council. Let me just check real quick. Can everyone hear me with now that I've kind of great, because I tried to lower my mic with the train. I think those are in Fort Collins know about the train outside my window. So appreciate that. So first, we're going to talk about our first legislative recommendation. And then I'll pause that for each one to ask if there's any questions. So the first one is, and I think you all got these earlier, is again to kind of the similar one we had last year, which is an additional, thanks for putting that up because I was trying to switch between screens, additional capacity support for furworm. And we had this recommendation last year, but we still felt very strongly about this recommendation for this year. And when I talk about these three kind of recommendations, we had a much longer list. So and we had opened the meetings for all of you to come and listen if you want to, but we had a very extensive list that we, over the last 2 months, have kind of shortened down and provided some more information and details. So this one was from last year, but we added a little more information into it. So bear with me as I read through this, but we wanted to talk about appropriating $1 million specifically for capacity building through furworm for at least 1 year, subject to available appropriations thereafter. And I want to talk about that as I read through this at the end, because that's kind of important information to talk about how this is a little different. The Forest Restoration and Wildfire Risk Mitigation Grant Program funds 2 types of projects: fuels and forest health projects, the implementation on the ground, and capacity building. And the language for this is for capacity building projects in the original legislation allow for applicants to purchase equipment for project implementation. And then in 2021, the Senate Bill 21-258 was passed, made several changes to the furworm grant program. And these changes included expanding eligibility for capacity grant projects to those providing local governments, community groups, and collaborative forestry groups with the resources and staffing necessary to plan and implement forest restoration and wildfire risk mitigation projects. So other eligible capacity building costs include collaborative capacity, personnel capacity, partner outreach and engagement, identifying priority project areas, prescription planning, and acquiring community equipment for use by landowners. Furworm capacity grants currently are funded with up to 25% of the total furworm funds available, and the program has an annual appropriation of $8 million. So this is our proposal, is that this proposal would add an additional $1 million per year specifically for capacity requests for at least 1 year, in addition to the 25% of the existing furworm funds. In total, $3 million would be available for capacity support up to $2 million, and then back up to that for at least 1 year and subject to available appropriations thereafter. Was we wanted to be careful with the language, but to open that up to say we need multiple years of funding, but we didn't want to put a timeline saying for 3 years or 5 years, knowing how this kind of, as we had gotten those updates talking about the small bucket and how the appropriations has been a very hard conversation this year. So that's our first recommendation. I hope I read through that okay. Very similar to last year. Does anyone have questions about that? And no, also we talked about and called out equipment and some of these specific items so that it was a little more flexible and really helping around the state, some of these larger and smaller collaboratives to have some of that flexibility and to be able to address this capacity need. Any questions? And I have to say that with our conversation, of course, the topics and kind of the recommendations for the full Forest Health Council, we did have a lot of talk about workforce, capacity, biomass, all these things. And so it still continues to be some of our largest conversations. So with that, that's our first recommendation. If I don't see any hands up, so I'm just assuming there's no questions. Okay. So we'll move on to the next one, which is to expand the Colorado State Forest Service internship program. And so this is something that I'm hoping our colleagues and Director McCombs and them maybe can add, but to expand and fund the Colorado State Forest Service internship program to higher education programs located, and this is very important, located close to Colorado State Forest Service field offices. So we think there's that really strong connection and very important for infrastructure and capacity with staff is to have this internship program only expand to community colleges or degree programs that are associated with field offices, because that infrastructure is already there and those relationships. And so if we're going to expand, we would need to have those out into offices that already have kind of those relationships and maybe those programs and opportunities already in place. So as I understood it, this last year with the Colorado State Forest Service, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm like you, James, I didn't sleep much last night, only because there's a lot going on in my county right now. But there was 91 applicants who applied for the internship program at Colorado State Forest Service last year, but they were only able to fund out 22 or 21 of those. So there is a large gap of funding and be able to get all those internships funded. And that would be kind of our workforce or capacity pipeline that needs to be addressed to get those folks out into these much needed and very important internship programs and get those folks out into the workforce and continuing through the pipeline, workforce pipeline. So Director McCombs or others, do you want to add anything more detailed wise to that program?
Yeah, no, thanks. I might just provide some context so that folks understand. So when I got to the organization, we were funding about 4 to 5 internships annually, just internally with internal resources. After some of the sizable investments made in sort of the 21, 22, 23 session, through a partnership with the Warner College Dean Alonzo Aguirre, he had some philanthropy from an anonymous donor that was interested in expanding experiential learning opportunities for students. So I just met him in the middle and said, hey, I'll put in, this much money if you'll put in that much money. And it exploded to the extent that, we had 21 over 20 internships with 90 applicants. And that was just within CSU. And so there's just this huge demand from both the students who are trying to get into the pipeline, as well as entities that want to benefit from creating that pipeline to expand. And so our goal is to, through the dialogue, was to surface this great success that we're having, and then see about how we can continue to expand it to institutions all across the West, or excuse me, all across Colorado, that could then not just necessarily benefit the State Forest Service, but potentially benefit other agencies that are looking for that pipeline opportunity as well. And the other thing I would offer is we negotiate with CSU HR. We can hire up to 5 of those interns non-competitively per year, just based on that intern experience using the pool authority that CSU has. And we've done that. And we probably would have been able to place more of those folks into permanent employment if we had more authority. So it's kind of mimicking the Pathways program that the U.S. Forest Service, well, all federal agencies use through the Office of Personnel Management, to just straight line students into experiential learning that would then prepare them to take immediate employment upon graduation. So we want to keep as many of those Colorado students, no matter where they go, right here in Colorado, and put them to work in the organizations that need that capacity in order to move us forward on our shared missions and overlapped missions. So it was just, something that we're trying to advance internally, and certainly through our partnership with DNR. And as we dialogued with the Ledge Committee, they found it appealing as well and wanted to bring it to this body for consideration. Kristen Switzer's on, so if we have any targeted, she's our experiential learning specialist. She also teaches at CSU. If you had any targeted specific questions about our experience today, Kristen can speak to that, as well as the funding component. But I just want folks to realize that the demand is significant in the student body. We just don't have the resources to plug them in. And the cool thing is that every single one we plug in, that's that networking and relationship building and connection. So all of a sudden that student becomes a target for the NGO space, the local government space, the state government space, and even we'll even send a few to our federal partners if we have to. And it's just really exciting, and the demand is significant. And Dan and I were just with the dean and the provost and the vice president for research about all sort of new leadership at CSU, and Dan in particular was hitting hard on how DNR needs these resources and these students as well. And I think that was representative of agencies across state government, as well as, again, the whole entire partnerscape. So that's all I have on that, unless there's questions. And then, like I said, we have an expert on the the call here. So if folks need to ask specific questions, Kristen can be my phone a friend.
So, and I will probably call on Kristen for a minute too. I want to talk about a certain thing that we're doing. So Paige, I know you had a question about, does Colorado State Forest Service have the capacity to manage these? And that would probably be part of this, is to have, they'll probably need to hire a coordinator to help manage all of those across the state, and those administrative fees. And so that is something we did talk about. So those will be some details to be kind of talked about is if this goes as a recommendation and goes forward with the legislation, that would be crafted into the stakeholdering and talking about what would be needed inside the legislative or the fiscal note. Does that answer your question, Paige?
Yeah, I'll just to emphasize that. I mean, I know from experience that managing interns is a body of work, and making sure that they have a good experience. So I would just really encourage us, as the council, if we are going to put this forward, that we specifically include support for them to, add whatever staff capacity they need to make sure that this program is managed effectively.
And I appreciate that comment. Thank you for that comment, because that is part of the conversation that we had. And so it's something that we're certainly aware of. And so it'd be, again, these are kind of more high level, but yes, we can, specifically call that out if the full council wants to do that. Other thing that I think is really important to talk about, and something that we're looking at here in Larimer County, is we can provide the money for the internships, but it's also housing and transportation costs. And so that is something also that I think should be part of the discussion, because it is kind of something to address. And so something that's innovative that I'm not saying this is a model, but just something that I think, Kristen, I hope it's okay to talk about, but Larimer County's partnered with Loveland Rescue Fire Authority. We've given some funding, and along with Colorado State Forest Service, I think CSU and Front Range is paid internships for a certain area of Larimer County, and the Loveland Rescue Fire Authority in their brand new firehouse and another one up in the foothills have provided housing for those interns to live inside the firehouse with the firefighters, and to provide the gear and the clothing, and so we're partnering with that. And so that was one innovative way to provide for housing, and I'm not sure if other areas around the state might have that opportunity, but that's another thing to think about. We thought was with the housing issue for the interns. So with that, before we phone a friend for Kristen, I thought I see Mr. Ring's hand, and then Director McCombs.
Yeah, Matt. So my question is, are you going after more funding or do you have the funding in-house already to run this program, I guess is my question.
No, that's a really critical question. And so, yeah, that philanthropy has dried up, and our ability to continue to invest as aggressively as we had is diminished as we, obviously those stimulus related dollars sort of started to dry up. So this would be additional funding to sustain the programming that we already have in place. This is the last year that we have that resource at the Warner College and probably at the State Forest Service. So this would be new money to establish a new program. And I'm so glad that that Commissioner Shattuck-McNally brought up the partnership with the Fire Protection District. Kristen, what was the other organization that we partnered with as well? There was like somebody else out. I can't just off the top of my head remember. I apologize.
Yeah, we have a partnership. 4 of our internships are funded by the U.S. Forest Service.
That's right.
Yeah, and they have dedicated funding for a couple more years, but that will run out as well.
Yeah, that was the timber strike team that the regional office invested in to help do work in particular on the ARP associated with wildfire crisis strategy. So there's, we're looking at a really holistic concept that allows all, to leverage resources at every internship, and then to potentially partner with entities that are struggling to hire, right? And again, you can't guarantee employment, but if we can create high probabilities for employment, it becomes really, really attractive to students who have, what I've found out, a deep sense of anxiety about being placed when they graduate. And so, leveraging some of that anxiety to getting them into a place where we want them, and then helping them get connected with permanent employment. And this will also dovetail with the industry-based internship program that we're standing up with resources that were invested from the legislature in a previous session. And the intention really is to just continue to source our needs as fast and as rapidly as we can to get folks deployed. I think the conservation districts could be huge partners in this regard. I think there's just a lot of places where we could plug folks and then really tighten up our communication and our connection with the federal pathways programs to ensure that our federal units in the state of Colorado are well resourced as well. And with all the institutions that we have in Colorado with really robust programming between Western's Master's Environmental Management program in particular, CMU is doing a ton of program expansion. The expansions that we did with the 2-year programs at the Mancos campus of Pueblo Community College, as well as the expansions at Front Range here in Larimer County and along the Front Range. Huge opportunities. We're building out the programming. Now we get to build out the pipeline to funnel these young people into the game.
So are you asking for legislation to get more money for this program? Is that what, I mean, that's what.
Yes.
That would be the council's will at this point.
Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
and so that, so I apologize if I wasn't more clear. We're going to ask to have expand and fund. I think I said expand and fund. So we're looking at least probably 350,000 ask for in the budgets or recommendation, but we just don't, but that would just be for the Warner College, as I understand it, and or the Front Range. So we don't even know kind of numbers for the whole state yet, but we're going to try to work on kind of getting a more, an idea, or at least an idea, but we thought maybe as we're stakeholdering and if this goes forward, as it goes forward, the stakeholdering and the bill draft would be able to, and the fiscal note would be able to come together at that time. So does that answer your question? Great. James, I see your hand is raised.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just wanted to caveat, I think the reason, a lot of the reason there's no like direct funding request in this specific thing was, in my experience, when we're asking for stuff like this, we don't want to be in a place where it's already set in stone when we're presenting that bill, because what we don't want to happen is kind of what happened with House Bill 1024, where it's like this set in stone $300,000. And then the legislatures get that and their heads just go, whoa, do we have that money? So it's giving us the opportunity to like Director McComb said, sit down, figure out what those resources are that we need. That way we can present this number to the fiscal analysts when they're working through the bill to say, okay, we did our due diligence. This is what we think it would cost, rather than like, here's this money, we hope we can get it. So we are kind of exploring options on like what that looks like, but we wanted to make sure we have all the information before we put like a funding number in that legislative, if should it become a bill, that bill.
Thank you, James, for very well explaining why we didn't kind of put a number on there, but I just give the ballpark of what we think it could be. So thank you. Any other questions? I want to, I know we're kind of getting up on break time. We have a couple more here. And so as you, Brett, I'm sorry, I just saw your hand.
All right, I could probably put this in the chat. 2 quick things. This is awesome. I've seen and experienced the benefits of these interns, actually boosting my organization's capacity to work with State Forest Service throughout the summer. This is really important to pair with the community college programs, because and it really helped transition undergraduate students into also graduate programs, because those are the foresters, the NEPA planners, all those people that are going to set up the forestry work for the industry people to go and do the work on the ground. So we kind of need to do both. I think it's worth saying this is also really important for increasing the diversity of the forestry workforce. We've actually tried to hire students from CSU Pueblo, thinking, oh, it's CSU, we could do that. And there's lots of administrative barriers. So I applaud expanding this to other universities to increase the diversity of our forestry workforce across the state.
Thank you. And that's exactly what we talked about as a legislative committee. This is not only just for 4-year, but for community colleges, degree programs, but also we heard very strongly that it's also the more advanced degrees for silviculturists and all the other, more advanced or more trained folks. And so I think this is an opportunity to get folks in all kinds of learning, opportunities and getting them into all across the state. And I think knowing that there's schools in Gunnison and Mesa and Fort Lewis, it's all the above. And so this will be, I think, a game changer. I think I'm really excited about it. So any other questions? We'll move on to their last two. Okay. So the third one, as we keep talking about, well, we've been getting into, you know, high school and post high school and post graduate programs, but we still have to get folks and youth knowing that, hey, this is a career and it's a very needed career and very important. And as you know, Senate Bill 5, we kind of called that out, was to get information into the hands of guidance counselors. And so there's still some things working out with Senate Bill 5 to kind of get that information and how that information gets out. We know that, you know, schools are kind of overwhelmed with all the things that they're doing. And there's also career fairs and construction career fairs, but there's probably not something like this, with this career path being very focused or explained all the way down into middle schools. So we thought this was something that to kind of create that pipeline to make sure students know about this and can provide opportunities for them to explore and learn about these careers and how important this work is. We need to get further down or further upstream or further down the line of school. And so this is something that we talked about to expand forestry career pathway awareness in middle schools and high schools. And so we talked about what is already in place, because we get to start a new program or to bring in a new program costs a lot of money, would take a lot of infrastructure and time. And so I had this idea that one infrastructure that's throughout the state that's already connected to schools and middle schools and organizations is CSU Extension. And so we had talked about, they're actually in the schools doing some of this work. And I happened to have an opportunity to talk with, she's actually a friend of mine, but I happened to be able to talk with Carrie Rollins, who is, I think, the Front Range Regional Coordinator for CSU Extension. And she actually used to work in DNR for Larimer County. And so she understands kind of the importance of this work. And I come to find out when I talked with her last week, she was having conversations with the Warner College to recruit that diversity nationwide for some of these programs. And they're actually looking at how they could work together to recruit out of historically Black colleges and other diversity programs throughout the whole country to bring folks here to do internships. So she was very excited to hear about these discussions. So they already have. So I just thought I'd share some of their thoughts about this because we'd like to see if we can if there's funding. Again, this is funding, but they could extend a program because we don't really probably have the time or the funding to start a whole new program. But since this infrastructure through extension is pretty much throughout the entire state, this is some of the things that she said they could probably expand or already start. So she thinks that there's probably lots of information and things we could do to help bolster, modify, or tweak some of the things that they already have and going on in extension. So there is the statewide 4-H Positive Youth Development Network that's already existing, and they already have relationships with most of the school districts, if not already in the schools, and they're already looking at coming in to present on different agricultural and other programs in the schools already. So this is something they could expand and develop along with the partners to like what kind of curriculum there would need to be. And most counties already have 4-H staff, and 4-H staff already has a relationship with all those after-school programs as well. And this really makes them kind of unique and statewide partner that already has a lot of this infrastructure. They have lots of different delivery methods that they could kind of expand or slot this into. They have what they call SPIN, which is a special interest clubs. And so they kind of require traditional meetings or coming into schools, but they could also bring more flexibility to kind of have a forestry or forestry focused kind of program. And they also utilize proven research-based curriculum. So there's really not much to develop because they already have a lot of this access and they already have a relationship with the Warner College. So this would help them maybe increase the speed of implementation if we try to do something like this. So they already have the partnership with the Warner College of Natural Resources, and also relationship with Colorado State Forest Service. And so this could include the career and college trajectory programs like paid internships. They also have a paid internship program that they could expand or connect with. And let's see, they also are, like I said, partnering across the nation to better integrate people of color into the field of natural resources. And they this could also include a partnership with Colorado State Forest Service on educational materials and expertise. And they could help support, identify key counties if we wanted to start small with this and then expand. And strategically hire 4-H positive youth development specialists dedicated to serving with the experience of welfare and strategic background in this. And so anyway, they're interested in supporting this. And if we wanted to do this, it was something we could kind of expand and look on this going forward. This was very brief conversation with her because she had been out of town, but it's something that we talked about as a full, as a legislative council, our committee, that it was something to kind of help expand the pipeline further down into youth and middle school and high schools to kind of get folks going into postgraduate programs, whether it be community colleges, four-year colleges, or degree programs. And so the positive of this would be more funding to already enhance this and already set up infrastructure that's already out in the state and has connections into schools and to counties and to agencies. And so that's our number 3. And Carrie Rollins and folks would be more than happy to come and present and talk about this and have more further meetings. They're actually pretty excited that we even thought to kind of reach out to them. Legislative committee, so we got that information. Any questions, concerns, comments?
Well, this is Abe from Douglas. Commissioner, I just wanted to thank you for that. You know, in our county, we're about 50% rural, and I know a lot of Colorado counties are similar, and providing that education and risk management information is really, really helpful. We've certainly seen that with the in-kind matches for mitigating densely forested land where people are, land rich and cash poor. It's working well, but people understanding and knowing how important it is to do that is really critical. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Morgan.
Yes, real quick. Last Friday, I had the opportunity to talk to some folks with one of the large equipment manufacturers, and they were cooperating with a program for the state of Arkansas for essentially vocational pathway development, including forestry. And it was just very interesting there. They have one van that they've equipped with all kinds of interactive activities, and it travels from high school to high school or middle school to middle school. And in Arkansas, that's been very effective in educating students with specialists or people who actually know the different trades. So it's a vocational pathway even below the professional forestry positions, because there's also a huge need in that. And I was just aware of that Friday, and it seems to be a very effective program for them. And it's very much aimed at the middle school and high school level. And they feel it's so successful that they're going to add a second unit doing that. So just a thought.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Appreciate that. You always have some great things to add with your experiences. So any other questions? And of course, like we mentioned before, these are high-level ideas that would, as we stakeholder and bring this together, and thanks, Jane, for the update, that we will probably bring this more forward. So with more details if the council approves these. So, okay, so we'll move on to our last one. So as James had shared earlier, House Bill 2410 1006 assist the navigator program. We call it the Community Navigator Program. We would like to, if this bill does not pass, or if there's needs to be some tweaking, we think this is a very important program. We heard from the Forest Health Collaboratives and some of the NGOs across the state, especially the ones that are kind of new or up and coming or smaller, just having that assistance to be able to navigate all the different grants and timing is really helpful. And so we put this on the list so that if depending on the progress or the success or how House Bill 2410-06 comes out, this is something that we still feel is important to call out and to put on the list that can be modified or pulled off if 1006 passes. So I don't know if we need to go more into that, but I think James kind of explained that, Bill. And so those are our recommendations. We thought we would kind of not do the full 5 this list because last year we had a lot of things on the list and we wanted to kind of really focus on these and develop them a little bit further. As you can see, it's really kind of focused on career pathways, capacity, workforce, and we really had a long conversation about biomass and slash programs, but we feel like we need some more information to really learn some more and have some more presentations before we can really come up with any kind of recommendations. So our focus this time was on capacity and workforce. And I appreciate, again, everyone's work and time. And thanks for letting me present on these. We're pretty excited. We feel like these are pretty impactful things. Any questions?
Great job.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And then so one other thing, just from the legislative committee, we did take a full vote to approve coming out as a full council to support House Bill 241006. We have not done that as a full council to come out and support on that. I know as we're getting down to the very end of the session, we did vote unanimously as a full legislative committee to support that bill, but we wanted to ask the full Forest Health Council for support and endorsing that bill per se, and so that we can kind of be more active in as a legislative committee to go and testify and support going forward. So I would also ask that we can take a vote on that as well.
Jody, remind me what's that bill again? 1006. Which one was that?
It's the Community Navigator bill.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Amy has a question.
Amy.
Yep. Thanks, Commissioner. I had a question on the Community Navigator, depending on the outcome of 1006. And I'm wondering if it doesn't make it forward this session, whether it would make sense to consider plussing up the capacity side of the furworm grant program to allow this. I think the concept is fantastic. And I guess I'm just wondering if the committee talked about whether that could be a more viable path.
Yes, thank you for that question. That's a great question. And we did have that discussion if that was something that we would have into that furworm capacity building. But we thought, and whether we call that out specifically in that recommendation number 1, but it's certainly something that we had talked about putting in there, and we could combine that in there, but we thought we'd call it out separately since this bill might pass this year. And we just wanted to make sure we emphasize we think this is an important piece. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. And I assume if 1006 doesn't pass, we could regroup and strategize a bit more. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So with that, there would be 2 different, I'm assuming, Mr. Chair, that I could ask for us, or would you ask for that vote or for those 2 different votes?
Yeah, Jody, why don't you make a motion just so it's clear on which bill we're talking about and just make sure everyone's clear and if there's any clarification questions.
Okay, so let's maybe take the 1006 first, and because that's a smaller one. So the Legislative Council, our committee would like to ask the full Forest Health Council to support and endorse House Bill 24-1006, the Community Navigator Program bill. And I believe that was one that James had brought up, and it also is in the chat for the details. So I
this is
move
Dave.
that I would, thank you.
Motion's been made, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed say nay.
I abstain, John Ring.
Okay. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I move the legislative committee, we move that we would approve all 4 legislative recommendations from the legislative committee with the caveat of number 4, depending on if House Bill 241006 passes, we can come back and address that, but we would love to move that those 4 recommendations are approved as legislative priorities for the 2025 legislative session.
Second.
Okay, there's a second there. Any further discussion or clarification? All those in favor? Oh, Katie, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to clarify for number 1, I already brought this forward with the legislative committee, but my organization has received furworm funding and we plan to apply for furworm funding in the future. So I'm abstaining from all votes related to furworm funding. So just putting that out there.
Great, thanks, Katie. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor signify as aye.
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 Okay, any opposition say nay.
I abstain as well. Abstain for this
Okay,
one.
there's John is abstaining again, so the ayes carry that. Well, thanks, Jody. Thanks for all
Yeah,
your
thank
work
you.
on this committee. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss the 30-year vision. And so we'll make it easy. How does 11 o'clock sound? Come back at 11? Okay, great. Okay, we'll get started in just a minute here. Okay, how about we start back up? Does that sound good? All right. The next agenda item is the discussion of a 30-year vision. So, as I think most of you probably know, one of the council's statutory duties is to develop a 30-year vision for forest health in Colorado. So at our meeting last fall, we started some of the conversation about how we would develop this vision. And over the last few months, DNR staff and the State Forest Service staff have been working together to kind of flush out how that could potentially look like. And I think there's a few different options here. And I was going to turn it over to Allison and Matt to kind of walk through kind of what this could potentially look like. We want to get input from you all too to make sure we're on the right track.
Thank you so much, Dan. I'm going to first pass it to Courtney to sort set the stage of where we landed at the October meeting since I wasn't there, and then she'll pass it back to me.
Yeah, thanks, Allison and Dan. Yeah, as Dan mentioned, in October, the council discussed prioritizing the 30-year vision as like the next item it really wanted to tackle. And one of the ideas that was brought up was hiring a facilitator to bring the council together and guide them through the development of this 30-year vision. I can post the statute, like the statutory duty in the chat specifically. Essentially, it's develop a 30-year vision and goals for forest health in Colorado. It's pretty vague, which means it's up to the council's discretion on what this 30-year vision, like what the output is, but also the process of coming to this vision. So we talked about hiring a facilitator to guide the council through that process. But another idea has also come up from the State Forest Service on like more integration between some things that are already in the works. So Allison is going to share a little bit more about what it would look like to hire a facilitator and have a separate process. And then Director McCombs is going to talk about this new other potential option. And we wanted to leave a lot of time for the council to discuss and decide how they want to move forward.
Thank you, Courtney. So, you know, to respect the process and where we were last October, we wanted to be able to have a discussion amongst us all about the timing for this. So, you know, hiring a facilitator or being able to use some facilitation services and folks that we might have within our organizations and entities is definitely still on the table. Between Courtney, Matt, and I, and James, we've discussed that this could look like a day or a day and a half of a facilitated exercise together. And that if we wanted to get this moving, this summer would probably be the most appropriate time for that, knowing that we still have you all on the council and that some folks are also timing out in the fall. So I know schedules are busy, but we want to still keep this option on the table and be able to hear from you today, whether the need for this comes in the immediate time and that we can fulfill this, or at least start this process. Before we go to questions, I think I'd actually like to pass it to Director McCombs here so he can talk about another approach to fulfilling this 30-year vision. And maybe after Director McCombs talks about some other options, then we can bring it back to the full council for questions.
Thanks, Allison. So just, I mean, it's relatively simplistic, but as we were sort of thinking about not only the process and the outcome, right? What would a 30-year vision look like for the state of Colorado as it relates to forest health? But for me, it was about sort of like, where does it live? And there was an opportunity that came forward, and we are in the 5th year of our state forest action plan that many of you participated in developing. And we're not necessarily going to like fully revise it like you would a forest management plan or something along those lines with like the U.S. Forest Service, but we are going to take a hard look at, you know, what's changed, what could potentially be tweaked in a way that would continue to make sure that that document is meaningful, that's being incorporated in planning decisions and processes and such. And I thought, you know, this would be a great opportunity potentially to integrate the Forest Health Council's work and presence into this forest action plan. And that a component of the revised state action plan would be a page or so describing the Forest Health Advisory Council's work, its mission, and then also its vision, and ensconcing that in the plan itself, so that as we, excuse me, as we transition out, right, as we come and go, that there's something more static and create some constancy, continuity in the policy formulation that we engage in. And then the only other piece of that is that, and then I would hope that we stay super high level. You know, I'll just be transparent that I think we have a pretty good idea, a sort of where it is that we think we should be moving as it relates to Colorado's forests. But at the same time, we know that in the highly dynamic environment in which we're in, that those dynamics are going to shift, and we're going to adaptively manage this, which is why monitoring and whole concept of adaptive management is so critically important, so that things don't run out from underneath us, and we're staying flexible and being responsive to the changing nature of the needs, while at the same time sort of keeping that very clear focus on where it is that we're trying to get, acknowledging that wildfire mitigation, watershed health protection as it relates to the nexus of the forests, and then forest health in general is a decadal endeavor, right? We're going to try to move as many resources and as many communities and bring everybody to the table to activate as fast and as intensely as we can, everywhere we can. But we know that it's still going to take a sustained engagement with the landscape to undo 125 years of suppression and sizable changes in the nature of the way we live and interact with the natural environment. So I just wanted to propose that whatever we generate together as a body, that I would encourage contemplation about where it lives. And I think a great place for it to live is in the revised State Forest Action Plan. And then as long as the statute that created this body remains, then that's where that expression of your will and the description of your work would live as well. Again, integrating as much as we can and trying to keep as many policies functioning together as we can, as opposed to our sometimes traditional approach, which is to sort of do our own thing and go our own way. We're all in this together. We got to knock it out of the park together. And I just think this is one small but potentially meaningful way to come together. But I'm not hell-bent either. So if you want to have a standalone, I just wanted to put that idea in the room and let folks respond. As far as the process, I didn't have a ton of feedback on that.
So any questions regarding this? Any opinions? Samantha?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for that context too. I have a question, kind of greater connection to strategies that exist. I imagine this overlaps with the Colorado outdoor strategy, but I was just curious what that looks like from an interconnectedness perspective, and whether this strategy, the 30-year vision, living in a certain place, would impact how that's connected to that work.
I don't have a super specific answer to that from my perspective, but again, with Dan and I, when we were with, and I would like to hear Dan's thoughts. Like you rattled off, I think like 4 things, like the climate climate adaptation roadmap, the greenhouse gas, like all the initiatives that the governor and you have as a cabinet level official have been advancing. How do you see? I guess when the governor's office talks about how we integrate all these different endeavors being led by different agencies, but all with a nexus around clean water, clean air, clean soil, abundant opportunities for recreation and habitat for our wild neighbors, like how do you see, or how would you like to see us integrate these different distinct planning efforts into some form of a united Colorado, the Colorado way?
Yeah, Matt, you're asking me that?
Or anybody, I mean,
yeah.
I'm just here, literally hearing your voice yesterday as you talked about all the different initiatives that you've been leading and the DNR's been involved in. Just thinking about, that larger question to Samantha's point is, how do we, continue to integrate these distinct but connected entities?
Yeah, I mean, they're all very different, but they can help inform one another too. The outdoor recreation conservation strategy, that's really kind of at its, I would say, kind of early stages. It's in phase 1 right now. It's more or less a blueprint for what we're doing for outdoor conservation recreation, and it's very much ground up driven, similar to the water plan. But I think it's important to know like what all these studies are doing and if there's any overlap and nexus, especially when it comes to like, water issues too, with the Colorado Water Plan. And we have a wildly important goal that's working towards the implementation of that. So I think it is important as we work through this 30-year vision to be acutely aware of all the different other analysis and studies that are going on that may be able to inform this 30-year vision. But Amy Moyer?
Thanks, Director Gibbs. I had a question on the sequencing of how the Forest Health Council's 30-year vision would be incorporated into the refresh of the Forest Action Plan, and the sequencing of whether the Forest Health Council would, I see a lot of value in potentially a facilitated process, and whether that would happen first and help inform the refresh or review of the Forest Action Plan. But maybe Matt, you could speak to just how you see the sequencing happening.
Yeah, no, that's a helpful inquiry. So I think for us, it's really the Forest Health Advisory Council is the gubernatorial and General Assembly advisory body that helps bring together diverse stakeholders to set policy trajectory and to advise our elected leadership on policy formulation. So if that's the case, then I would hope that it also has a place and a voice in driving the way that we the issues that we want to engage with and potentially the solutions that we want to highlight in the plan that is required by law is theoretically designed to drive forest health and watershed health policy in the state. So the sequencing, I think, would be that, to Allison's point, this summer seems like a sensible time to take on this discussion. And then as we, in that calendar year 2025, and we're involved in this update, and you take a step back. What has changed? What do we need to fine tune in order for this to continue to be relevant and drive decision making? I think it's just carving out an opportunity for this body to inform that process. And if you agree and then are supportive, then again, you have a living document that will be updated again, regardless if we're all here or not, that can continue to bring forth that vision with each successive leader and each successive representative from the stakeholders here, to keep driving us towards decision-making and policy formulation to turn that that vision into a reality over successive decades. And, when I think about it, I go back to the cohesive strategy. I mean, we just haven't moved too much farther from healthy, resilient landscapes, adapted communities, and safe and effective fire response. So I think beyond that, we just have to think about what are those uniquely Colorado components that we need to highlight, and that we want to see a delta. We want to see a change from current condition to the future condition. Write that down as succinctly and as thoughtfully as we can, and then have it be somewhere where people will see it, and where administrators, Southern Health Program, and folks that are implementers will see that and continue to take it as a guide star for where the heck it is that we're trying to get in the period of time that the laws required us to think in. Does that help, Amy?
Yes,
Amy,
thank you.
was it? Yeah. Okay. Okay, Mark Morgan.
Yes. As I understand our mission here in this group, we're a Forest Health Council, and we make recommendations, and the programs that are run by Director Gibbs and Director McCombs, I feel like, as Director McCombs just said, we need to take a pretty high level plan here. And I think that sometimes in groups like this, we tend to expand our role here to maybe beyond what it should be. We are an advisory council, and so we suggest opportunities, but the professional management and the directorships reside in your guys' agencies. And so we can try to make suggestions on what we feel this long-term vision should be. But at that point, you're going to have to bring your professional experience and make decisions. You're going to make hard decisions. And so to me, I don't want to get too wrapped up in a facilitated process, and I don't have any problem with all storing it essentially in the forest action plan, because people come and go and positions change. But
Mark, you froze there. We can come back to you. Amy Moyer, was that a hand from before? That's still up?
Oh, yes. Let me.
We were
okay. I was just okay. Let's move to Christy and then Abe.
Thank
and then
you.
Katie.
I want to echo a little bit of what I think Mark was saying and also what Director McCombs was saying. And I think that we should stay high level. What I would hate to see is that our good intentions on this council maybe actually create more work for your agencies or create barriers for your agencies down the road if we get too detailed about what our goals might be. So I would definitely be a fan of just staying pretty high level. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Christy. Abe and then Katie.
Hey guys, so I really appreciate the the statutory charge and the comments raised about the plan. In Douglas County we just do. The planning is important, but I think what's really difficult is when you have documents that just sit on a shelf. And at the end of the day, if we have a document that nobody's referring to, I think the earlier comments from Dan and others were salient, that they have to be relevant and implemented on a level that's consistent with the governor's priorities and the state's priorities, and really evidence-based recommendations. I will say, having led so many initiatives in Douglas County, we work with a facilitation group that really can kind of knock out some of these strategic priorities very quickly. In a 4-hour session, they can kind of pull together the recommendations and expertise from the room, integrate that into a, pretty bulleted set of directives that can then be integrated into a strategic plan. But the two questions are, where does that document live? How is it, and then how is it implemented? But facilitate, and I really respect the comments of the others on the call. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I think very concentrated, efficient facilitation can kind of cull together all of this great expertise on this committee.
Yeah, thank you for your comments on that. Katie.
Yeah, I guess I kind of have a similar comment. One thing is I do think the power of this committee is that we do have really diverse representation of like different fields and different aspects of forestry. And so thinking about having it live in one specific spot or like live in another document, I want to make sure that we're still like we are the ones guiding it and we're not like letting the forest action plan guide it, if that makes sense. Like we want to help guide the forest action plan, not the other way around. And so that's like one concern about having it live in a specific document. But on the other hand, I echo Abe's concern about it becoming a shelf document. And I think if we can like independently create this thing, but then attach it to a document that we know is going to value what we say, and if we know that like Director McCombs and Director Gibbs will use this document to guide like kind of their strategic things, then maybe it could be a good idea to have it live somewhere like the forest action plan, if that makes sense. So kind of balancing out those couple of things.
Great. Thank you for your comments, Katie. Brett.
Yeah, I echo what Katie just said a lot. And others, I think I really like the idea of using the forest action plan as a vehicle for this to live and actually be implemented. I want to emphasize what other people have said is this Forest Health Council transitioned a couple of years ago. It used to advise the state forester, and now we advise the state legislature and governor. And so just sort of recognizing if this 30-year vision is now going kind of back to the state forester and the state forest action plan, that then I would put the onus on the state forest service. And I've heard Matt say, I don't think it's decided, but various levels of this, of opening up the forest action plan to input and being, influenced by lots of other people besides the state forest service, right? Making it a larger collaborative process. So I think in order for that to happen, right, just recognizing that this council still reports to the legislature and the governor, and not taking a step back, but this could be taking a big step forward together, if it is a broader, more inclusive process. And every forest action plan has been getting in better and better. So this is an opportunity to just get better this time, right? I think the other thing, two other questions of how does this connect? The other thing that comes to mind is the shared stewardship agreement that is also held at the governor's office level. And that I think is just with the U.S. Forest Service, but they might have included BLM and some other agencies in there. And so I don't know what activities moving forward and if there's some connections there, or if that hasn't honestly been relevant for a while now. And so if that's not that much anymore, that's fine. But I know Allison has been talking about reviving that. And one other point is I think there's potentially some things from the Forest Resilience Planning Guide that this Leveraging Resources Committee is putting together. I think there's a lot of frameworks and similar concepts being developed that could inform a 30-year vision. We're thinking along those big picture lines as well. We've already hired a facilitator, have started the process. So if there's some overlap there, I think that could be a way, because I really echo what the rest of the council said is, if this is going to happen, we need some paid facilitation for it to happen, or some other help. And as a council, we've struggled. We have two committees, and those two committees have done a lot of really great work, but we've struggled to start any other committees on any other of the issues. And so just recognizing what our capacity is, and if we want to do more, I think we really need some more support and funding to help support this council. And that is actually a question I meant to ask earlier. That was a legislative committee recommendation a while ago, was to ask for support for facilitation for the council. And I did not see that on the legislative recommendations earlier today. So I think that's really important to consider moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. And in terms of some of your questions and comments, like the shared stewardship MOU is definitely alive and well, and Allison has had some important meetings that continues that. And going back to Samantha's comments on like the other plans that are going on, and like the outdoor strategy and so forth, I do think a facilitator could just very briefly, so that we're all informed of like what's going on, like, and how this can help inform other studies and analysis that are going on, and how this fits in. But I just want to just roll off a few big ticket items that are currently underway. There's a state strategic plan for natural and working lands. There's the Colorado Water Plan. There's the DNR actions in the climate preparedness roadmap. There's the Colorado Outdoor Strategy. There's shared stewardship MOU, and then now this 30-year vision. And that's just rattling off a few different high ticket items. And I know there's more that I'm leaving out, I'm sure. But having everyone understand what is going on and how this fits in, I think is really important. I think it'll make us really strong in Colorado, because this is a Colorado vision, right? So Pat, and then Matt.
Thank you, Director Gibbs. I think it's really important to have a high level vision and some overarching goals, identify what our values are. I think it keeps people centered and focused on the highest priority items. I appreciate what Katie had to say about the document being something that influences the forest plan, not the other way around. And I could easily see there be some overlap with the mission or the mandate of CWCB as an example, or other divisions under DNR. What I'm wondering is, and I'm not normally one to kick the can down the road, but I wonder if we work on the plan and decide where it lives after we've come up with those high level goals and values.
Yeah, interesting, Pat. Matt.
So I really appreciate the conversation, and you know, to the extent that I could be authentic across the screen, like the goal is not to co-opt this process. The goal is to ensure that you know, we want the Forest Action Plan to be the state's plan for forests, not the Colorado State Forest Service plan for forests. And this is why we're already integrating with CFRI and other centers within Warner as a first place to start. And we're really trying to think openly about how do we be all, you know, encompassing to the extent that we can to drive policy that will actually drive our decisions and implementation on the ground. So please don't, you know, mistake this for anything other than a novel idea that I thought, let's say it just happens to coincide with an update for the plan. And this could be a really thoughtful place for it to sit, to keep the State Forest Service, as well as all the entities that we interface with as a service and outreach organization, acknowledging we don't manage any land. Everything we do is in partnership inherently with either an individual landowner or a kaleidoscope of partners. It just was an idea. And you know, and I just want to be totally clear also that like, it was just an idea that we thought this could be a really nice alignment, and we are actively participating much deeper integration with the Department of Natural Resources and all of its divisions, and truly functioning as the Division of Forestry as it was envisioned. And so there should be, and there will be, based on my approach, deeper integration across all the different organizations that have natural resource sectors as part of their mission and focus. And so, again, my hope is that we find ways to tear down all of the barriers between the organizations, acknowledging we've got to respect mission and somewhat, to some degree, turf, but at the same time, the natural resource, the ecology is all integrated, so are the people. So I think as administrators and as actors in the space, we've got to figure out how to continue to integrate our work as well, so that we change the culture of the way we approach this work. So that we can activate at the scale of the problem. And one of the ways we do that is just find unique ways to fuse together the distinct entities that are connected through their work. And this was just one way I thought we could fuse the Forest Health Advisory Council's vision for how things look when it's done in 30 years as a part of the plan that theoretically drives the exact same outcome. Just my thinking, but want to be clear, I mean, people are often suspicious because of how excited they get about everything, that I want to take over everything, but that ain't the case. You know, we can barely keep up with what we're hanging on to right now. We're asking for help and looking for help.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Matt. Anyone else want to share what they think about this? And you raise your hand if you'd like, or just jump in. I think so far I've captured that it seems like majority of folks would like to have a facilitator to really have that person kind of educate folks on what the landscape looks like and help bring folks together. It sounds like maybe there's not consensus on putting it in right away in the Forest Action Plan, but maybe through this process of facilitator, we can maybe get to that point of where it lives later on, but we don't necessarily have to decide that right now. What else? What else are we missing? Mark.
Just a question that you or Director McCombs could answer. Brett brought up a good point that this is a council to the legislature and the governor. And I understand that. But as we make recommendations and then it seems to me they're going to come back to you as a director and Director McCombs to implement these on the ground, or to use this information to help you guys maybe take a course of action or do your job better. So to me, it kind of looks like a circular thing or a chicken or an egg thing here. But are we trying to create policy here, or are we trying to be a reference for information to your organization? I guess that would be my question to you.
Matt, you wanna?
So yeah, I mean, the statute recommendations for attaining a 30-year vision for forest health in Colorado, including goals in both annual and multi-year recommendations for actions to improve forest health and reduce fire. And so my hope is that, you know, that what comes through that process that we're describing are actionable items that this body would like to see us take in real time, or be responsive to in real time as we can, based on resources and other dynamic factors. Yeah, I mean, I think that legislative intent was to get this group of stakeholders to create some actionable items and a futuristic mindset about what we're going to change through those goals and objectives in a way that theoretically could be meaningful. And we want to be responsive to that. You know, I think this is this council's really surging, it's growing in its capacity to take on these issues. I think, you know, through the iterations and its new incorporation, we're getting better and better. The support from staff and from Dan as the chair, gets better and more exacting. And I think we'll continue to get better every year and start really nailing down the things that need to change or be resourced in a way that allows us to move forward and bridge the gap between where we are now and where it is that the state wants to go. You know, our focus is relatively narrow because we just have limited resources. So we're trying to deploy in every major watershed in the state. We're trying to activate the wildfire crisis strategy because that's also the highest priority area that we found through our planning. And then everywhere else, you know, we're trying to grow capacity early stage and with entities that can help, acknowledging we can't really grow much more as an organization with the resources we have now. We're frankly, you know, we're hanging over our belt at the moment. And so, you know, everywhere else, we got to get ready to recover and replant. And so, you know, I think that we could move through a process pretty quickly with all the expertise that are in the room. And then again, where that lives and how that's referenced is something that the body gets to decide. And of course, the State Forest Service looks forward to, in consultation with all of you on this call, to responding in whatever way that we think is best together, because we're ultimately going to have success is going to be tied to our ability to activate and move out together.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Any follow-up, Mark?
No, I'm trying to get a better feel exactly what's expected of us as this group and what the results were that you were expecting. So that helps. Thank you.
Okay. Brett.
I appreciate your comments, Mark, and I think absolutely this body advising the state legislature and governor, a lot of that does come back to the DNR and the State Forest Service to implement. But forest management and forest health is much bigger than just the State Forest Service as well. And yes. So, you know, Division of Fire Prevention and Control, but also recreation industry, the water, like there's lots of people that this body was created intentionally to include and advise. So I think just keeping that in mind, but I am really encouraged by, you know, as Director Gibbs was mentioning, there are no shortage of plans for all these other initiatives out there, right? And I'm really encouraged by the State Forest Service and what Director McCombs is saying. I want to be clear that I was very encouraged by that and not critical of how you're being open and opening the opportunity to make the Forest Action Plan, you know, increasingly inclusive and more collaborative in this next iteration as a way to broaden it as the State Forest Service as one vehicle to implement, but, you know, incorporating elements of recreation and water and other fire management and things outside the State Forest Service as well. So I think the State Forest Action Plan, it could be one place, but also it could be the vision from this council could be informing all of those other plans that Director Gibbs mentioned as well. I just would also go back to sort of our capacity as a council and how many initiatives we want to take on and support what Commissioner Layden was saying of maybe this is a half-day thing and see how far we can get, or leveraging the Forest Resilience Planning Guide and things that we already have going that are in this direction, and seeing what we can do with that.
Great, thanks, Brett. Ethan.
I've heard some perspectives in this discussion that sort of make me want to just sort of come back to the Forest Action Plan, in the sense that, how willing and how deep in the weeds are folks on this committee willing to get? Because, you look at the Forest Action Plan that was released in 2020, it's very specific. It's, building diversity of tree species. It's building heterogeneity at stand scales. And so, I'm just sort of saying, do we want to pull that back and say, oh, let's make this more of a policy type document, as opposed to kind of what it is right now, which is providing general recommendations similar to other federal entities like the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, because it's modeled on their, sort of selection menus for management actions in a very general way. So, I just wanted to sort of bring that reminder back into what the Forest Action Plan is now, and whether or not we really want to change what it is to, this sort of 30-year vision, or trying to make it a bit higher level than it currently is.
So just real quick, Ethan, that's not what I'm at all proposing. The Forest Action Plan development standards are standards, and so we'll meet them as defined by statute. That being said, I mean, I'll just be totally candid. As I'm thinking about this, I'm like, I'll probably put it in there regardless, if that's its appropriate hope. It's just, it would be an important thing to incorporate. So to send a signal to the state that, like, we're responsive to these advisory bodies that are helping us craft a focus on where we should work. So I think we should potentially move off of this and maybe come back to what do you guys want to do as it relates to the process and the outputs. Allison and I, we did dialogue quite a bit on, like, and this could take us a different direction, and I think it is. And so that's just my recommendation at this point, is maybe let's just focus on what it is that y'all would like to generate and how you'd like to go about doing it, and then we can figure out how we might be able to resource that. And then if it lives in the Forest Action Plan, awesome. That might just be something we do informally with the blessing of the council. If it lives elsewhere more formally within the DNR framework for the council's administration, that would be awesome too. For me, again, my overarching business is to try to activate the planning capacity that we have, and the planning frameworks in a way that drives activity, that drives outcomes, and really holds us to account to move in the places where we have demonstrated are the highest priority, and to start the, like, chugga, once we get this thing moving in 20 to 30, 40 years, maybe we've actually substantially changed the nature of things, so we can encounter what we know is coming in a way that's endurable as opposed to the alternative. So I would, it's obviously up to the group, but I would just recommend we could sort of put a pin in this one. I appreciate your openness and your dialogue on it, but I just don't want to take us off mark, because I think the intent here was to decide, or at least have some focus on where we would head next as it relates to the process and the outcome. So that would be my recommendation to the body at this moment.
Yeah, we can start talking about process, and then just a one step back just a little bit, just thinking too of what Ethan mentioned a little bit too, and looking at Amy Moyer in terms of, like, her water expertise, and it almost seems like the Forest Action Plan is maybe similar, looking at Amy again, to, like, our basin implementation plans that are, and then that rolls into the water plan type thing, where the 30-year vision is bigger, and you have other analysis to help inform this. But anyways, it sounds like, are most people okay with exploring a facilitator? So we can, everyone's shaking their head with that. Allison, Matt, do you want to talk about how that could look like too? Or maybe we don't need to decide that right now, but.
Well, Matt and I have been in discussion on the different levels that we could have a facilitator. Obviously, there is a timing. So in this discussion, especially from Abe's comment on maybe really effective and maybe shorter facilitation times, maybe like a half day. But in previous conversations, we talked about a full day or a day and a half together as well. So I think that's something we can think about and pulling together. We've also done some research on our end with Peak Facilitation and some other facilitative groups of being able to provide this service and how much that would cost. And another idea from Director McCombs was to work inside our organizations to see if folks that already have facilitation backgrounds could provide this for us at no cost. So I think these are things that are on the table right now. Matt, did I forget anything?
I was shaking my head, but I realized that doesn't make any sounds. So no.
Okay.
Okay, James.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Dan. I'm done.
Oh yeah, it just looked like James maybe had a question too.
No, I was interpreting the Matt head shake.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Abe, question, comment?
Yeah, it just all goes down to the end why, and I think so many people already made that comment. You got all these plans, and Director Gibbs, you got your hands full. I think at the end of the day, you have decision makers, you have the legislature and the governor that would ultimately make a decision and then appropriate funding for any plan. So what's the point of a plan? We don't want it on the shelf. It has to actually have an impact. So I agree with many on this call who said, let's move it along. I don't think we need to have an extended conversation around it. I'm pleased to make a motion to direct staff with the resources we have to identify a facilitator that can perhaps coordinate a day or a half day for us to all get together and provide recommendations within our areas of expertise to create a plan. And then let's get on with it.
Okay, thanks, Abe. I see a lot of head nodding. Any other comments before? I don't know if we need a motion to that fact. Maybe we should, just to be official.
I think he made a motion, so I'll second that if that helps.
Okay, I think that helps. Any further question? I mean, a facilitator can help us, can work with staff too and get everything dialed in, and then we want to be super efficient with everyone's time. Samantha?
Yeah, thanks all. Just an operational question. Allison, Courtney, can you remind us when folks are going to be rolling off terms and when we might expect new people? I'm just wondering if that would impact this decision-making in the summer or if it's worth waiting at all. I hate to kick the can down the road, but just curious there.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the first council meeting that the majority of the members attended was in November of 2021. So if we're looking 3 years out, that would be November of 2024. And so that's what the Attorney General representative for the council has confirmed. We are looking into and trying to gather more information about whether members could be reappointed or not. Right now, I think the safest conclusion is, or the safest idea to go off of is that you won't be reappointed and that new members will fill those roles that are appointed by the governor. So that would be November.
So I have a question about that, if I might. And I understand that's probably the recommendation, but we have a lot of I don't know if they'll reconsider that. There's some folks that maybe won't be available, or maybe some that could be reappointed. There's just a lot of information and background and knowledge that would be kind of, even if we got this plan, it would kind of have to restart a lot of conversations. So I'm just wondering if you as agencies are making a recommendation for some flexibility, maybe think about, for some of those rolling off, to keep, or to offer that opportunity to have second terms or not. Just curious.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, we'll reach out and to the folks that their terms are up and see, if you're, number one, interested in continuing, and if you have time to continue, and we'll definitely consider that too. I mean, these are governor appointments, and the governor does keep many people, if folks want to continue on most of the boards and commissions in the state. So it just depends, but we first want to know, do you want to continue to serve? So I don't think statutorily, I'm looking at Allison and Courtney, if there's any reason why people can't be reappointed. I don't think it just says one term, does it? Or I could be wrong.
It's not in the statute or the bylaws. I think we heard from someone that the governor might have a preference for new members, but it sounds like, Dan, you're saying that he has a precedent of reappointing folks. So we're going to get more information on that. And we're working with Elizabeth Joyce right now.
Yeah, the DNR has more boards and commissions than I think any other department in the state. So he frequently reappoints people, and sometimes he doesn't, so it just depends. But quite often most people are reappointed normally.
My brief comment, Dan, would be what a remarkable waste of time, to have people on a board for 3 years and then lose all that institutional knowledge and start from scratch. So just from a common sense standpoint, I hope people would be able to continue. And if not, let's get going. Boy, if we only have till November, even more reason to move it along.
Yeah. Okay. So Abe has made a motion. I can't remember, maybe Julie seconded it, I think, possibly. Any further questions in terms of just in the concept of moving this along to the next steps of facilitator, and then figuring out how that looks like? Everyone agree to that? So let's vote on this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any in opposition say nay. Okay, great. We're moving that forward. So thank you, everyone, for your conversation and your thoughts on this. This is important stuff for sure. We want to try to get this right, and we haven't even started yet. So I think we'll be off to a good start of setting the positive framework together. Next on the agenda, we actually have a 30-minute lunch break, but really the only other item we have is roundtable updates. So why don't we just move to roundtable updates, and then we can finish up early? How does that sound to everyone? Okay. So just raise your hand if you have an update that you want to share. And not everyone has to go, but I may just start calling on folks possibly. Okay, Matt.
Just real quick, I just wanted folks to know that the State Forest Service sent up a letter in partnership with the State Forestry Agency in New Mexico to the Chief of the Forest Service, requesting some convening to understand the sizable investments in reforestation both states have made, and looking for federal leverage. We're also in dialogue with senior officials across the Washington office in the region to talk about the potential for some piloting around state production of federal plant materials once the nursery's up and running again. And it's a really exciting how positive the feedback has been from the U.S. Forest Service and USDA NRE. Lots of those folks were at ATF or After the Flames last week. And just wanted folks to know that our intention to leverage those incredibly important resources that you were instrumental in helping bring to fruition is in the works. And so anybody at the department, or anybody at the Forest Service, I'm not going to hold it against you to encourage them to put those conversations moving in the right direction. and to help Colorado expand its desire to be a leader in the reforestation recovery space. So just that's our only update, other than Christina Berry, which we already talked about. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Let's go to Katie and then Ethan.
Awesome. First, I just want to thank both the committees. I had a listening session with collaboratives from across Colorado back in, I think, January, and then I've been working with both the Legislative Committee and the Leveraging Resources Committee to keep those moving forward. So I just appreciate all that work from everybody. I also am super excited to share our save the date for the 2024 Colorado Forest Collaborative Summit. This is going to be September 4 through 6 in Durango. We've got a really good planning team this year. Our kind of through line that's going to be going throughout this whole day-long workshop / conference is kind of matching like federal and state high-level initiatives down to local efforts, and how do you kind of build those connections, and also how to sustain collaboration long-term if maybe you were started after a disaster or something, and then you want to keep that collaboration going long-term and keep doing good work in the community. So everyone on this council, I think, would be a really great fit to go. We would love to have you there. If you have any questions, let me know. We don't have registration open yet, but I'll paste a link to where the registration will be. So yeah, I think that's it from me.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Let's move to Ethan and then Abe.
We are, the State Forest Service is in the process of, well, my group is in the process of finalizing the carbon accounting framework for the entire state. So this is a really impressive effort that's modeled off of similar accounting frameworks currently in use in Washington, Oregon, and California. It uses legitimate FIA data to essentially provide an accounting of the stocks and fluxes, or the loss / gain of carbon across different ownership classes, ecosystems, for the state in its entirety, amongst different pools. We're in the process of preparing a one-pager to try to get out to legislators, excuse me, before the end of this session, so that can be on their mind and maybe generate some interest amongst them in looking at the report once we release it in the summer. But we're getting really close. I believe April 30th is our deadline to get it to our Communities and Communications Division to have them format it and then eventually put it out to the public and everyone to view. So this is a really large effort, but should hopefully start helping us guide some of these, especially things around carbon, as we move forward in the state. So
awesome. Thanks, Ethan. Next up is Abe.
Thanks, you guys. Really good updates. You know, in Douglas County, our Wildfire Action Collaborative is about 40 members from the state to local fire mitigation experts. They've made recommendations, and we have adopted and implemented an increase in our helicopter helitack program, have implemented the shaded fuel break. That's done. Our wildfire mitigation program for in-kind matches, 50%, has been implemented. We've executed a prescribed burn and are following up on another prescribed burn. And then I think I mentioned in the chat, we're doing a biochar tour on May 9th up in Berthoud. So good things, hoping for more to come.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Abe. Mark and then Jody.
I'd like to thank everybody on this mission for support on the development of programs for workforce development. Some of that money is starting to reach the ground, and at our annual meeting last Friday, we had presentations by Pueblo and by Front Range Community College, and I think everybody there was really receptive and thought that was a great beginning, and we view that as a great beginning, but I appreciate the support, and everybody would like you to know how appreciative that we are. So it's really a big thing for us in this vocational workforce development. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. Jody and then Amy.
Thank you all. So I just wanted to share, we have a lot of events happening throughout the next few months around our county, a partnership between our volunteer fire districts, some of our HOAs, our Office of Emergency Management, Emergency Service with the Sheriff's Department in Larimer County, where we're sharing the air curtain burner that was purchased through the Big Thompson Watershed Coalition, but it was donated to the Lebanon Fire Rescue Authority so that they have the ability to have the insurance over that. And so we're going to be, I'll be trying to follow those around to see how that comes with communities coming together and using this air curtain burner. The county has put in a lot of several, like I think $200,000 into supporting that throughout for the Sheriff's Department to run that and to continue our Firewise, or not Firewise, but our home defense program. And then we also had very successful implementation. We should be announcing our grants for neighborhood fire mitigation through our Office of Emergency Management. We upped that to over almost $100,000 this budget season. So I'm very excited. I really advocated for that. But what's kind of interesting about that is we require a social component for those neighborhoods to come together and have a social component. Not only are they doing the work, but they have to have some kind of either getting together for lunch or something, so that they also kind of develop a connection and make a kind of resiliency hub. And so we're really excited about that. Program has been very successful for us. And then this weekend on Saturday, actually, I'll be going up to Glacier View Fire Department, which is up near Livermore, and observing a live burn observation and question answer event with all those agencies, and looking forward to that. So thank you. That's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Jody. Amy.
Director Gibbs, I will add that one of the big priorities on Colorado's Western Slope that you may have seen some news articles about is moving forward with an acquisition of the historic water rights associated with the Shoshone hydropower plant. As Julie knows, that is a plant owned by the Public Service Company of Colorado, which is a subsidiary of Xcel Energy. But those are some of the largest and most senior non-consumptive water rights on the Colorado River. And the goal is to add beneficial use for in-stream flow purposes, which would make that the largest in-stream flow water right in the state of Colorado. And the nexus with this council is there are ecosystem benefits across the entire main stem with that acquisition. And we are having a discussion with the White River National Forest coming up to help document all of the benefits on their national forest lands. So if you have questions about that, it's a very exciting opportunity in our state and on the West Slope. And I'm happy to answer that. So just reach out to me if you want to talk more.
Thanks, Amy. I know that's a big deal. I know you've been working on that for couple of years now, at least, and others, many more. So thanks for your updates on that. Let's move to Julie next.
Hi, thanks. And I'm sorry, I was going to grab a link when we took the break, but I'll send it out to the council later. You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to mention the public safety power shutoff that Xcel engaged in here recently. I think many can appreciate the safety reasons around why we did it, particularly in high risk fire areas. It was something that, you know, perhaps we weren't expecting to have to do quite so soon, but we learned a lot of lessons as a company. We'll be implementing those, and the company is just really soliciting, you know, if you've got feedback from your communities, from your organizations, and things you want us to consider moving forward. You know, the door's open and the phones are on. So please, you know, feel free to engage with us. We welcome the collaboration on that. One thing we are, you know, as we think about next time, right, is rolling out some additional communication in the areas for customer safety, and thinking about how to get folks prepared in advance, right? There's just a lot of things people don't think about until it's too late. And we think we can lessen the impact as we think about needing to use public safety power shutoffs more frequently in the future. How do we do that and keep our communities less disrupted? Having them plan ahead and think about that so we can be safe with our forests and with our communities, but at the same time not overly disrupt if we can help it when severe weather strikes. So wanted to throw that out there. And if folks have thoughts or comments and want to connect offline, always happy to get you to the right people.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that. Any other member updates? Okay, I'll give you mine. Want to give you all, first of all, updates on staffing. We want to congratulate, first of all, Kelly Romero Heaney. She was my assistant director for water, but we elevated her position to be the new, brand new position in the DNR, deputy policy director. So we're excited for her to have this opportunity. We also hired Lacey Gentry to be our federal affairs policy analyst. As you can imagine, the DNR were involved with everything dealing with land, water, wildlife, minerals, and oil and gas. So we're very busy with kind of navigating what's going on at the federal level. So Lacey helps us keep track of everything and various different ways that we can weigh in on what's going on in Washington, D.C. Also, here, folks that you're very familiar with, but I want to make sure you all know that Allison Lurch is now our Forest Health and Wildfire Mitigation Program Manager. So congratulations, Allison. And then we also elevated Courtney Young as our new Forest Health and Wildfire Mitigation Program Administrator. So let's give them two a round of applause. They're absolutely rock stars on my team, and we're excited to recognize their great work, especially, working on this committee, but so many other areas too. Let's see, I want to give you a COSWAP update. Our second round of the Landscape Resilient Investment Program is in progress. So the DNR, we have a $10 million budget to spread across our strategic focus areas, and representatives from the strategic focus areas are submitting $1 million proposals for strategic wildfire projects, that including supporting everything from personnel capacity to planning. Awards for those are expected to be made in June. And then also the second round of the COSWAP workforce development projects were awarded this winter, adding 23 new projects. And that's with partnering with youth corps, and then also our Department of Corrections SWIFT crews that are currently working in the Pueblo area, and are going to be, SWIFT crews are going to be working in the Lake County area once the snow starts melting. And then our Wildfire Ready Watersheds program that is housed within the Water Conservation Board. They have 11 active Wildfire Ready action plans that are in progress. There's another 8 implementation grants in progress for a total awards of over $5 million. We're expecting another 4 to 6 of our Wildfire Ready Watersheds applications before September. So that's really moving forward really well too. A very successful program. Our U.S. Forest Service and DNR shared stewardship agreement, MOU, is going to be extended for another 5 years. So we're really excited about that partnership. We really want that to be meaningful. And then, so that's really it for our, forest health related updates for you. But next, as we plan for our summer meeting, we're really looking to have a meeting on the West Slope if possible, and would love to get your ideas on if any of your organizations would be willing to host us, for about 25 people. And feel free to jump in right now and say, hey, we got you. But we would love to, we move these meetings around the state, and again, it would be great to have it on the West Slope. So does anyone have any ideas for that off the top of their head, or does anyone want to just say, hey, we can do it?
Dan, remind me of the date again. Let me just look.
We actually don't have a date scheduled yet, so there's a lot of flexibility. So definitely summertime.
Okay. I can work with Courtney offline, but I think it's possible we could host in Glenwood Springs.
Yeah, your office would be a great location for sure. Awesome. Well, let's just be in touch about that. That'd be great. Okay, let's move off from the let's see, partner updates, and then move to public comment. I don't see anyone that's not part of our group normally from the general public. So with that, the last bit is just really a motion to adjourn. So
I'd so move.
okay.
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been moved and seconded. All those in support of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we got out of here early. Hey, thanks everyone. Really appreciate your
Thanks,
great
everybody.
work. Thanks for your service
Thanks,
to the
everybody.
state of Colorado.
Thanks,
And we'll
all.
be in touch
Bye-bye.
about the summer meeting.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.